Hi class, today's topic is culture. There's just a few parts of this chapter that I want to talk about in video format to just offer a little bit more clarity. First, let's talk about the term culture. The definition of culture is that is the ideas and behaviors of a group of people. Culture has three main components: values, norms, and language. So first, let's talk about values. Values are those abstract ideas of what is considered right and wrong. So when you think about the American culture, some common values associated with this culture are things like materialism, individualism, education. So that's just a few examples, but can you see how those are all abstract ideas? It's not material, concrete items. They're abstract ideas. Now let's talk about norms. This might be a word that you haven't had a lot of use with. The basic definition of norms is that it is a social rule. In each culture, there are tons of norms that help govern our behavior. It helps make our behavior predictable. We want those social rules because that way, when we are assuming that most people are following them, it makes their behavior more predictable and makes interacting with people easier. So let's talk about norms. There's actually a few different types of norms. One norm that we have in the American culture is something as simple as men wear pants instead of skirts. Now, that's just something that helps men interact a little easier in culture. And because it doesn't have any moral significance and there's no major sanction or punishment if you disobey that social rule, it's called a folkway. So that's one type of norm. It's called a folkway. It has no moral significance, and it just helps you with your daily interactions. Another example of a folkway are things like your hygiene. We hope and expect and encourage you. We have this social rule that you need to brush your teeth, wash your clothes, wash your hair, to do those things on a regular basis. It does not have any moral significance if you don't do those things. It might be a little bit more difficult for you to interact with people if you don't do those things, and you will feel social pressure to follow those social rules, but there's no major punishment if you don't. So that's why those examples are considered folkways. I'll give you one more example of a folkway before I leave it. Something as simple as mowing your lawn during the summer months. There's no major sanction for most of us if you don't mow your lawn. It's considered common courtesy, and our social surroundings encourage you to follow that social rule. Your neighbor might come over and say, hey, when are you going to mow your lawn? That is encouragement and social pressure to follow that social rule. Now, those are simple rules to help you with your daily interactions. They're called folkways. That is one type of norm. Now, another type of norm is what's called a more. It's spelled M-O-R-E, but it's pronounced more. These are social rules that a society believes has moral significance and deserve harsher sanctions, harsher punishments if they're broken. So examples of mores in our culture would be things like do not kill, do not steal, do not commit adultery, do not cheat on exams. Those are rules that are more serious than just helping you with your daily interactions. And because they're more serious, we have harsher sanctions if you break them. And there's more social pressure to follow them. Another type of norm is a law. A lot of our mores, because they have moral significance, we as a culture believe that it's worth actually writing them into law, so there's the governing body of the criminal justice system to help enforce those rules. So let me just recap that real quick. One component of culture is values. That's the abstract ideas of right and wrong. A second main component are norms, and there's three different types of norms. The term norm simply refers to a social rule. One type of norm is a folkway. Those are general rules that help you with your daily interactions. They do not have harsh penalties if you break them. A second type of norm is more. Those are social rules that do have moral significance and do involve a harsher punishment and stronger social pressure to follow them. And then the last type of norm is a law. And those are the mores that we believe are important enough to actually write into legal law and so that the criminal justice system can help enforce those. The third component of culture is language. Now, when you think about different cultures, it's easy to say, well, Americans have a language. We have the English language, and then Japan has Japanese language. So it's easy to distinguish those two languages, and that's very true. But you can also look at cultures like the American culture and the English culture, where we share the same English language, but we can have words that are the same English word, but each culture gives a different meaning to that word. And I'm going to try and think of some examples. One for sure that I can think of is braces. In the United States, when you hear the term braces, you think orthodontist, and you think of putting metal on your teeth. Those are braces. But if you are in England and you hear braces, I've been told that that refers to suspenders. Another example is I was told that if you use the term rubber in England, that refers to tires, where in America we have a different definition of the term rubbers, where we think of birth control. So those are a couple of examples where even though it's the same language, two different cultures can assign a different meaning to the same word. So that's really interesting cross-culturally. All right, now I want to talk about subcultures. Subcultures are groups within the larger mainstream culture that can be identified based on their values, norms, and language. Okay, now these are groups that still follow the mainstream values, norms, and language, but they can also have their own distinctive set of values, norms, and language. Now, for those of you in North Carolina that are getting ready to participate in the discussion forum where you're going to be talking about a subculture or subcultures that you're a part of, if I happen to use a subculture as an example that you're a part of, you can still use it, but just do your best to try to come up with different examples of the values, norms, or language. Okay, so just do your best at that. Now, each one of us is a member of more than one subculture. I can think for myself, I'm a member of military spouses. I'm also a member of college instructors. I'm a member of the subculture of University of Oklahoma football fans. So each one of those groups has their own distinctive characteristics. So let me give you a couple of examples to clarify that. Now, to think about military spouses, my husband is active duty in the Marine Corps, and as his spouse, I have a certain set of values, norms, and language that I'm expected to follow, and I have social pressure to do so. Some values associated with military spouses would be things like commitment, honesty, emotional support. Some norms associated with military spouses, some social rules that I'm supposed to follow, would be things like do not cheat on my husband, send care packages when he's deployed. And you can even get some social pressure, obviously, for cheating on your husband. You have a lot of social pressure against that. But even for not sending care packages, the other military spouses let you know if you're not keeping up to par with that. And some language associated with military spouses. I couldn't think of anything specific to spouses that wouldn't also be a part of the active duty member, but some things that came to my mind that we need to be familiar with as spouses are their letters for everything, where it's PT and PFT and TDY and TAD, hash marks, chevrons, commissary. Tons of examples. I don't want to give too many because I know some of you are military spouses and might use that as your subculture. So lots of different language that outsiders outside of the subculture might have some idea what I'm talking about, but definitely members of that subculture will know exactly what I'm talking about when I say TDY. Okay, let me give you another example using my subculture of college instructors. Some values associated with college instructors are things like equality, fairness, knowledge, education, and some social rules. Some norms associated with college instructors are things like dress professionally, speak clearly, don't cuss in the classroom, and some argot. I had a hard time coming up with argot that was different, just distinctive to teachers that wouldn't also be recognizable to the students. The only one I could think of was census report, and that's something we have to do at the 10% mark of each term, is the census report. Now, I think I just threw out the term argot without explaining to you what that is. When you're talking about a subculture's language, that's referred to as argot, A-R-G-O-T, argot. Now, some other argot associated with college instructors are some other terms that you will recognize as a student. Things like GPA, Moodle, for those of you overseas, Go Army Portal. So, there's different language that we use that outsiders may not understand. I know I can still be talking to my husband today and mention Moodle, and he looks at me and thinks, what's noodle? So that's an example of something specific to our subculture. All right, I think I've covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover for the chapter on culture. If you have any questions or comments about the contents of the chapter or about the video, feel free to contact me. Have a great day.